Hi, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon and good evening to some. Thank you so much for joining us this month. We've, as usual, got quite a bit to share with you, so we'll get started. But we wanted to kick off with a little bit of good news for our friends in Melbourne. Melbourne, Australia, for those of you that are outside of Australia, may or may not have heard that our poor friends in Victoria have been kind of in lockdown, a very serious lockdown with COVID-19. And this morning there was some good news that apparently at 11:59 p.m. this evening, I think it is, that they get a chance to escape. I'm not sure where they're going to go at midnight. I'm not sure what will be open, but I imagine there'll be something open somewhere. So good to have you back, Melbourne. My name is Derek Bell. I'm your host for today, and we'll be hosting the session with Matt and Jason assisting from Q&A point of view. So you will see Q&A available through the Zoom function. So please go ahead and use that. If I don't see the question, certainly Matt or Jason will be able to respond to you. So yeah, so please go ahead and use that. Okay. First thing we always want to do is jump in and answer some questions. And we've had quite a few questions this month, which is good. So that's great, but still feel free to ask more. That's fine. So Lara's asking the question about creating landing pages and emails using block content. So absolutely, yes. So we covered this in quite a bit of detail. I think it was, I want to say March or April earlier this year. But there is certainly a blog post that you can access to read a bit more about that. You can also then access the replay. I know that we've had a number of clients who are doing some really awesome things using the new block content feature. We've started using it quite a bit ourselves as well. Yeah, there's a couple of case studies, not case studies, but experiences there that have been shared by some other customers on what they're doing, and people seem to be making good headway. So if you have some good stories to share, maybe throw something into the Q&A or use the chat function. You should be able to configure that chat to go to everybody, I think, from memory, the way I've got that configured. So please feel free to contribute. Next question is from Kath in Sydney. Do you have any tips about keeping wait lists for events, especially as we start to have strict number limits from COVID restrictions? Yeah, okay. Besides using some external functions, so for instance, things like Cvent, which has integration with Eloqua. You've also got Eventbrite. There's also an app that enables you to connect Eventbrite with Eloqua. I mentioned those two products because I know that they do wait listing and help you manage cap numbers and all that sort of stuff. So you can use that engine to kind of do that for you, which is helpful. We do have a solution that we have used here with some of our clients across Australia and Asia Pac, actually I think the US as well, where we utilize a custom object and forms using those two things together to reach a cap, essentially. So you tell the form what the cap is. Once the cap is reached, people are then moved to a wait list, and then they're notified that they're on a wait list versus getting a confirmation email. So that's one way to do it. There's a little bit of work involved in doing that. We can certainly help you set that up. That's no problem. But we have a few people on the call today who are using it. The Eloqua Event module does that. I don't know, sometimes it's like using a sledgehammer to open a peanut. So yeah, the Eloqua Event module, if you're running standard edition of Eloqua or enterprise edition, you have that included. It is an add-on for those customers using the Eloqua basic product. I would argue it certainly wouldn't be worth getting the add-on just to simply manage wait lists. But there would be a few ways that you could do that. Kathy, in your particular instance too, we probably need to factor in your CRM integration and understand how that obviously flows through the whole exercise. But yes, it can be done in a range of ways, and probably a conversation best of having offline so we can be a little bit more specific with what your needs are. Then Samari is keen to understand how we can better utilize Eloqua functionality to manage event experiences end-to-end as we're using different platforms for registration, event broadcasting, on-demand hosting, and after-event follow-ups. Okay, well, I'll give you my Eloqua view of the world response and see what you think. So certainly from a registration point of view, Eloqua is a no-brainer. It obviously enables you to issue out emails and drive people to a registration page, which can also be hosted by Eloqua. So an Eloqua form on an Eloqua landing page. Now you can also use any social advertisements, and I see a lot of your content in my LinkedIn feed, and I also get your beautiful emails. And so from the social feed, you could certainly drive people to the Eloqua registration page. So far so good. We're kind of keeping things, within Eloqua from a single platform, which is what you're trying to achieve. Now, when we come to event broadcasting, that's clearly not an Eloqua function, right? So that's really it's a Zoom, it's a WebEx, it's a GoTo, all that kind of stuff. However, the upside is that you do have the ability to integrate those, or many of those platforms, not all of them, but many of those platforms with Eloqua. So you can, instead of giving people a sort of quasi Zoom, your brand experience, if you're using Eloqua, you can give them your brand experience completely with no mention of Eloqua, no mention of Zoom. It's all about your brand and your messaging. The on-demand hosting. So usually the on-demand hosting, the most economical way to do that is usually with the company that's providing you the webinar product. Or if it's a live event, you might just end up with an MPEG-4 file, right? A nice little snippet, a 5-minute snippet of the event, for instance, that you wanted to share with people. What we tend to do at Marketing Cube is we store all of that information on YouTube, nice and free. Primary reason, and we actually do that with our webinars as well. We don't use the webinar hosting, the on-demand hosting solution. We push everything into YouTube. Well, we can either make it public or we can make it private. Private meaning that you must have the URL in order to access it. So we take some of that content, if you take the user group for an example, we upload that to YouTube, grab the URL, and then we simply load that onto an Eloqua landing page. We figure that we have much better control over the experience that people can have versus watching the user group and then potentially going to George W. Bush videos and cat videos and, et cetera, and getting lost sort of half an hour later or an hour later down the slippery slide that is YouTube. So we push that onto Eloqua. Then the after event follow-ups, well, absolutely, again, that could certainly be Eloqua to help you from an email point of view. So looking at those 3 points that 4 points you've raised there, the broadcasting piece is clearly the one that's not the Eloqua fit. But everything else, Eloqua can certainly help you with. So I hope that answers your question. If you go through the user group experience, as in getting the replay and accessing that information and the follow-ups each month, you'll see that that's essentially what we're doing. It's what I've just described to you. So Murray, the other experience we've had is with On24, and you might be familiar with On24 as an alternate webinar platform. It's been more than Zoom. Zoom's great. We use Zoom, as you know. On24 is a bigger product, and it's kind of broadcast quality. It's pretty amazing in relation to what it can do. Now, it does have a fairly sophisticated on-demand replay environment that you can host your replays in. And you can either give people straight access to it, or you can put them through a gate and all that kind of stuff in the form. So it's different and it's more sophisticated. We can certainly, we have a couple of clients who have had some really good success using that and Eloqua, and I'm sure we could arrange a time for you to have a chat with them. They're on the other side of the ditch, so you can't fly there yet, but we can certainly connect you if you'd like to have a chat with them. I'm sure they'd be happy to share with you the success they've had there. And Jasmine in Melbourne, do you have to be well equipped in Eloqua in order to understand this event registration and reminder process? Well, you're on the right webinar today, Jasmine, so thanks for joining us. Look, the answer is kind of yes, right, to a degree. I mean, like any software platform, largely, you can't just sort of, log in and expect to know how to run everything, but there are tons of guides available. There's a single city event guide that we've put together, which kind of goes into a lot more detail. It gives you screenshots of canvases, etc. And we'll be sharing that with you after this particular webinar today. But the secret to it is templates. And I feel like I'm sort of saying this too many times maybe, but it's all about templates. If you can template your canvas, if you can template the form, and even get down to the point of templating your emails for events, etc., that's got to make things a lot easier, which gives you time to focus on crafting your messaging and the copy and making the event sound exciting and enticing so that people want to register or they want to RSVP and come to the event. So yes, you do need to have some skills, and I think you've got them, Jasmine. I don't think it's going to be a big leap for you. We've already spent some time together, and we can certainly spend some more if you need to. So that's totally fine. And here from Belgium, how to manage event attendance with QR codes on badge implemented with Eloqua. This one got me thinking. Essentially what you're looking at here is creation of unique QR codes. Now, there are companies like Cvent. Cvent is one that does that. We've created a solution for a university client using QR codes that are linked to individual students. That's another option. There's obviously a bit more in the background and how that actually functions and works, but they use that from an event point of view. But I've been thinking too, in relation, I don't know what it's like in Belgium at the moment, but certainly in Australia, you go to any restaurant or bar or office, etc. Everybody's got a QR code on display. And so you grab your phone and you kind of check in, for want of a better description. There are a few things you can do. Obviously, a QR code can go anywhere, as we've seen with these COVID things that we've had to do everywhere. So I kind of wonder if you could produce QR codes that took people to a very simple form that could be your check-in form, and maybe it's just simply their email address. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. And what they've been doing in Australia is putting QR codes on individual tables. So you go into a cafe, and in the corner of every table, there's a QR code. So you just sit there and scan in, etc. So I'm kind of thinking that relates to another question that comes up a little bit later about attendance. So it certainly can be done. If you'd like to reach out to us, we can certainly help you understand that a little bit further and explain what we do and how we can potentially help you on that one. Jasmine did have a question. Jasmine, that's not an unusual circumstance looking at who's on the call with us today. So Jasmine says that she's got a sort of center for excellence, Eloqua team. She has to brief them, and then they will actually go in and build, etc. for her. So I think the critical thing in that process, Jasmine, is to have a very clear idea as to what the canvas is going to look like, because the canvas is the experience. So it will depend, I suppose, if you have access to be able to look at what they've done and to sign it off, or if you just fill in an Excel document and then you hope and pray that they understand what you've asked for. Not sure which one it is, but look, let's talk about that in a bit more detail. We can talk about that later if you like in a bit more detail offline. From Yulia in Auckland. Hello, Yulia. Are you on the line? You are. Good to have you with us. So is there a better way to feed through attendee lists rather than uploading them back as an Excel file? So what Yulia is describing is uploading external activities to Eloqua. So Yulia, hopefully some of your questions were answered already with some of the other responses. So there certainly are event registration apps like Eventbrite, and Cvent is a popular one. Cvent has a whole range of pricing too, by the way. If you talk to Cvent, they'll tell you, oh yeah, that's fine. It's $75,000 a year, and you'll pick yourself up off the floor. And then you realize they do actually have a range of solutions. That's their high end. But they do have other solutions depending on the frequency and size of your events. Cvent were very well known, or are very well known for big events. So, 5,000 people registering, that sort of stuff. But they do have other products as well. Yulia, the other thing that I was thinking about here was that concept from a check-in point of view of the QR code. I'm not sure what it's been like in New Zealand, but that experience I described with QR codes, like at every venue, when you walk into a bar or a restaurant or a cafe, everyone has to scan the QR code, it pops up. It has a form. It typically wants first name, last name, email address, mobile phone number, sometimes optional. And then you've got to tell them you don't have a cold and all that sort of stuff. But I just kind of wonder, is that just a very simple process that's kind of been right in front of us all this time that we've not really thought about? Something to think about. If you want to talk further, just shoot me an email and I'll explain in a bit more detail what I mean by that. But anyone in Australia who's certainly checked into any venue will know exactly what I mean. Okay, Adrian's throwing some comments in. Physical, could do Eventbrite tickets, mobile check-in, and have used the QR code before too for check-in. Yes, yeah. So the Eventbrite is good. I use Eventbrite. I have used Eventbrite for about 6 or 7 years with an NFP that we do 3 or 4 events every single month, and I've been using Eventbrite for that period of time. Great set of features, wait listing. Easy refund if you're charging. It manages that whole process for you. If you're running free events, that's fine too. So from a ticketing point of view and all of the services that you would expect around ticketing, refunding, all that kind of stuff, yeah, it's great. Question from, ever heard of anyone using Events Air with Eloqua? Not that I have specifically. We've got Adrian on the line as well today. He may or may not be familiar with that, Martin. But my general rule of thumb is if I'm looking at, if I'm an Eloqua customer and I'm looking at products that I want to add to my digital suite, one of the primary things I'd be looking for is easy integration with Eloqua and my CRM platform. There is the Oracle Cloud Marketplace that you can go to, and you can see exactly what is available today. The next step from that would be to look at a solution. If you absolutely want to get something, but there's no app available today, it must have at least have open APIs. If it has open APIs, well, then an integration can be built. And we've done that a number of times for clients with different applications. And yeah, they love it. They're happy that they really want their product. Makes sense. But if there's an app available, that can be a real plus as well. All right. So Yulia, I hope that answers your question. Cool. Excellent, Yulia. Yeah, look, it's pretty simple. If you've got any questions, just drop us a note and happy to help you out with that one. Alrighty, so what was actually on the agenda today? There were loads of questions, but they're all event related. So thanks for asking those questions. All right, so the fundamentals of the registration process, that's where we'll start. We'll then look at some campaign canvas designs and give you an idea. I should jump into Eloqua and I'll show you the event that you've all experienced this month with the user group. Then some form magic to drive your automation and personalization. And again, that's kind of one slide, but we'll spend most of our time in Eloqua looking at the form. And if we have time, we'll jump into 20D and look at the information that's coming. There's some pretty major changes. The big one is cosmetic, which is the new Redwood design from Oracle, which you're starting to see across oracle.com and Eloqua, etc. You'll now see that within the Eloqua platform as well. So let's jump in. So the fundamentals, when I talk about this from a registration process, and remember the premise of this month's webinar was that as things start to open up, i.e. Melbourne, which is great news, we're probably going to be in a position where you might be looking at advertising face-to-face events, maybe before Christmas, or certainly as you come into the new year. Fingers crossed for everybody, right? So we just want to do a little bit of refresh on that with you. So that's kind of the premise behind what this month was all about. So in-person or webinar, that's kind of the key question. But I just wanted to clarify some language with you before we go further, because depending on if we use the terms register and Rsvp interchangeably, that won't work. So let me explain why. Okay, so if you're asking people to register, the implication is that you shoot them out an email and in the copy, the only option is for them to simply register. I know this may sound really simple, but it's two completely different ways of running the campaign. So if we ask them to register, they either ignore the email and move on, or they click on it because they're interested, they reach the registration page, look over the information, bullet pointed agenda, no, not for me. They choose not to register, or they look at the information, yep, that looks really interesting, great, I'll register, excellent. So they register for your in-person event or your webinar. However, if you ask somebody to RSVP, there's a very different implication there. Okay, so as I said there, a polite person would respond with yes or no. So response s'il vous plaît, please reply is what RSVP means. Now, again, I'm sure you all know that, but that behavior from a technology point of view and how we implement the campaign and the form is completely different to the way we register. Register, simple, very easy, done. RSVP just requires a little bit more work. Okay, the third one though is where payment is involved. Now, Eloqua is not an e-commerce platform, as you know, but it does integrate with platforms. We've already talked about things like Cvent. We've already talked about Eventbrite, which can manage that e-commerce component for you. Now, of course, Anything can be built, but if you're trying to do things out of the box, there are two options. There are others, but that's two options. What we're not going to do today, though, is cover payment. Okay, so payment is not part of today's agenda. So let's have a look again at the two that we have left. So we have register. All right, so as I said, pretty simple to set up, best done using the campaign canvas and form templates to help deliver the consistent or a consistent experience. Templates are the way to have success. Then Rsvp, there are a few extra steps. There's not a massive amount of difference, but it's the form that really does a lot of the heavy lifting for you from an Rsvp point of view. And so that's why this month we asked you to Rsvp for the user group, so we could show you essentially what's happening in the background. So thank you for RSVPing, yes. All right, so there are a couple of things that you need to get down and answers locked in before you start your build, because if you change your mind on some of these things halfway through your build, it will fundamentally change the way your canvas needs to look. So is the event going to be an Rsvp event, or is it a register event, or do people need to pay for a ticket? So again, we're not going to touch on pay for the ticket today. We're focusing on Rsvp and register. A couple of other questions, and look, I was talking to Matt sort of 10 minutes before we went live here and said, look, yeah, this list could be 1,000 questions, but I'm going to try and condense it. What I've tried to focus on is the answers to these questions will fundamentally change the way you design your canvas. So will invitees be added once the campaign has been activated? That's a challenge. I'll explain why. How many invitations will be sent? You want to make sure you're sequencing in place, etc. You don't want to be sort of desperate to get bums on seats at the last minute and then have to sort of figure out and create new segments, or who didn't open, who did, etc. Let's get that organized up front, and let's just automate it. If you want to have a last panic ditch email, don't panic 24 hours before the event, panic 3 months earlier, and just get it organized on the canvas and let the canvas take care of it. And then how many reminders? And so this becomes a language question here too, by the way. So invitations go to people who have not registered or RSVP'd, and reminders only go to people who have registered or have RSVP'd yes. It just, I find the language, otherwise it gets too confusing. Answers to those questions are important. We'll jump onto the canvas in a minute and I'll explain in a bit more detail why that's the case. Okay, so let's jump in now to the campaign canvas designs and look at how that's all going to come together. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of a suggestion, and this only kind of struck me, I think a month or so ago. I was talking to a customer and explained what we did. And she said, that's a really good idea. And I was like, wow, I've never thought about it like that, but okay, I should share it. If you think it's a good idea, I'll let everybody else know as well. So when it comes to events, my approach has always been, well, no, it hasn't always, it's probably modified over the last several years. What I do now is I begin with my registration page, my form, and my confirmation email. So those three assets get built first. So I get those down, happy with the description, happy with the agenda, the form is doing what I want it to do, etc. And then the confirmation email. The benefit, the reason why I do that is because I want to be able to get the registration page up and onto the website as quickly as possible. However, if I leave the registration page, the form, and the confirmation email till the end of the build, I'm kind of wasting time and I'm losing opportunity. So that's the only reason, honestly. That's why we do the registration page, etc. first, so that we can get that onto the website. So there are some savvy customers amongst you who have identified that and do tend to, I can see through the attribution that you've come through the website to register for the user group versus from an email. So yeah, FYI on that one, upcoming events on our website. The next step is to then do your segmentation. The reason I do the segmentation next is because I then want to look at who ends up in my list, which will then determine the copy we use and potentially dynamic content in the actual email invitations that go out as well. Because the way we talk to senior marketers, CMO, marketing directors, etc., could be different to the way we would talk to a individual contributor, for instance, in a team. The benefit of today's event would be different for those two people, and so I only know that until after I've created the segment. So once I've identified the segment, I then look in at detail, look at who's in there, and we have them grouped by job categories, all that sort of stuff. That will then determine what happens from a copy build when it comes time to actually build the emails. Then, so once you've got the first step and the second step done, the second one is live, and you're now pushing out your emails and driving people to your registration page. In addition to that, and you can do this at any point, obviously, as soon as your registration page is live, you can start to look at social is it appropriate? Are there social channels that it makes sense for us to push people from Twitter, etc.? We actually had one person from Twitter register. I didn't catch their name though. I should have checked to see who it was. Anyway, so, and then the last one is sort of canvas number 3. So canvas number 3 is your post event, and you want to start thinking about that earlier rather than later. So you can see there in bold, we've got what I call campaign canvas 002, then campaign canvas 001, then all your social stuff, and then potentially 003. And I'll show you what that means from a naming convention point of view. So this is just literally a screenshot from our instance of Eloqua. And you can see here, if you follow if your eye goes down, you'll see the numbering, for instance, then the naming convention here. So it's always Eloqua user group, confirmation or reminders, or invitation only, etc. In some cases, post-event comms, depends when they go out. But the beauty of having absolute consistency in the way these things are named is especially relevant when you get into Insight. Because when I go into Insight, if I want to look at, for instance, just the invitation only campaigns as part of the user group, I can pull that up all by itself. Now, the other question you might be asking, well, why 2 canvases, Derek? Well, that's because I want to get the registration page up first in the confirmation email, and I want to push those people onto a canvas. So when the form is submitted, they go straight onto a canvas. And so I just found it easier to separate that out and have the post-registration canvas up and running. So that's why. You don't have to do 2. I just find it easier to do 2. So let's try and take a step back and look at what this flow might look like from a campaign point of view. So what I've tried to focus on here on the left is the source. So where are people coming from in order to reach the registration page? The only reason I've separated out LinkedIn and Facebook from general social posts was because you have the ability to present people via LinkedIn and Facebook with a form, which could take the place of the landing page registration form if you wanted to do that. It does get a little bit problematic if you start thinking through things like, you've got opt-ins now with LinkedIn, and I think also with Facebook, but dietary requirements and those sorts of things. It would depend on how complex your form is and the information you need, but it's possible. So all of those people essentially will come through. They can either hit the landing page or not, but once they register, essentially, they will receive a confirmation email. Now, the reason for the little squiggly line over here on the left is while you'll certainly have some people be candidates for your event through the CRM, they don't go straight to the landing page. Technically speaking, they come into Eloqua as part of a campaign or segment campaign, and then out they go from that point of view. Okay, so we've now used the form to send the confirmation email. And so following the confirmation email, we're now onto Canvas 002, which is going to send our reminder information. And so first reminder goes out, second reminder, depending, you may do more, depending on time, how much time there is between them confirming, obviously, and receiving that confirmation email. That's completely up to you. You may integrate and use SMS with this as well. And there was a question from Kath. So Kath had a question also in relation to the Marketing Cube SMS app and the ability to include a URL, which became available literally, I think, 2 weeks ago or a month ago. Kath, so we're trying to put together some updated documentation to help with that. It's pretty simple though. If you contact the support team, they can certainly help. I need to have a play around with it myself. I haven't done it. I've just been on a week's annual leave. Gotta love that. And so I need to have a look at that myself. And there's been some additional changes I saw just this morning where they've enhanced it further from a custom data, I think, information as well as to what you can do with URLs. But the answer is yes. All right, so you made your reminder for SMS, and then of course it's the end of the campaign. So keeping in mind with SMS, you want to make sure you actually ask people at the point of registering, would they like an SMS reminder? You might recall that's the experience you had when you joined us this month. All right, let's jump in and have a look at invitations. Thank you, Alex. Alrighty, so this is pretty standard for us, and it is templated. I can show you the template that we use each month. So you'll see we have customers who are members of the user group, and we have our internal Marketing Cube seed list, anyone at Marketing Cube that's interested in attending. We then have the good people at Oracle. So some of the staff at Oracle are members of the user group and join us from time to time, so keep them up to date as well. And then we also have prospects who are members of the user group. And so you can see their invitations there, and that's the end of it. Okay, so they're the 3 groups. Sometimes there's 4 groups, depends how it all works. So essentially, segment comes through, and you'll notice I've got wait 2 hours. Why do I have wait 2 hours? I do that because I've actually got this, this particular segment is configured to reevaluate every hour. So from the time that we launch the campaign to when the webinar actually takes place, some people may have gone to our website and joined up the user group using the generic registration form. So from the website, they don't join a particular webinar, they just become a member of the user group. They subscribe essentially. So what I want to make sure is that those people get a timely reminder or invitation to attend the next one that's come up. I mean, they've just registered. I don't want to wait a whole nother month before I invite them. If they registered and subscribed, well, let's get the invite out to them. And so I just wait 2 hours there because I don't want them to be bombarded necessarily, because all things being equal, they would register for the membership, get their confirmation email, and probably within, it could be within 5 or even 15 minutes, they would enter this campaign, and then they would be sent the invitation. So I just want to give them a little bit of breathing space in that process. So a really important one is this step. Now, this step is what enables you, if you go back to those questions I asked, will people be added to the campaign once it's gone live? Now, the answer is generally yes. It's the same old situation. Sales are like, yep, this is our final list. This is our final list. Yep, this is the final list. You go live, 6 minutes later, oh, we've got 25 more people. Of course you do. So what we want to do is make sure we control that. And really, it's no problem. It really is not an issue. This beautiful little step enables you to manage that process completely. All right. So and one tip for you, I find it much easier when you use this element on the, I'm trying to remember the exact name of the element too as I sit here. Let me just... where are we? It is the compare date step or compare date element. Like so. The tip I would give you, you've got different operators that you can choose from here. And I find, generally speaking, try and stick with the same operator as you're moving through your canvas. If you change the operator, for me at least, it does my head in. So generally, I try and stick with the same one. Okay, so if people come into this particular campaign, this was from the August user group, and that's just, I think, the day of, that was the day of the webinar. So if somebody comes into this campaign on or after 9 a.m. on the day of the webinar, I'm like, that's a bit too close because the webinar's at 11 a.m. I don't want to bombard them. Let's just give them a break. And so they exit the campaign at that particular point. We use the contact washing machine in everything we do. That's just helping us make sure the first name is in proper case. And now again, you'll see we're asking the question, but the dates start to change. So, and this is all written into my template. So I actually write the step name in here, which prompts me to ask the, load it with the correct date and time, etc. So as long as it is on, or if the contact is on or after the 21st, off they go. The vast majority of people won't be, so they're sent the first invitation. They come down till the 21st of the month. And then again, we ask the question because we need to constantly use this particular element, because if we have people coming into the campaign at a regular basis, we need to make sure that the language in the emails is relevant to the person who could be receiving it at any such time. And so that's where the compare date element is an absolute dream and helps you figure that stuff out. Now, what we do, you'll notice with the second and third invitations, nobody in the campaign will actually ever receive 3 emails. The only person that gets the third invitation are those who, let's have a look. What do I do? Opens. Yeah, so they opened the first one, but they did not register. Okay, so it's only possible to receive 2 invitations. This one over here is just for those people who didn't open the first one, haven't registered, so they get the second one, which is really just a repeat of the first one with a different subject line. However, this one over here acknowledges that group of people who receive your invitation, open it, and then potentially click through. You can measure that as well if you want to. I don't. I measure it by the fact that they didn't register. So they've potentially gone to the registration page, but abandoned the page for whatever reason. And so the language in this third email is just a little bit different. It's sort of last minute enticing them to come along. So what we do there for that first group, that first cohort that you can see being customers, is pretty much the same. With our good friends at Oracle, we don't bombard them. We just shoot them out 1 email. That's enough. We don't want to bombard them. So that's all good, which now implies, of course, that I'm bombarding customers and prospects. So I apologize. But if you've got any questions, just let me know. Okay, so prospects, you'll see again, it's pretty much the same process. Sending off to the registration pages, etc. So doing that for a webinar versus doing it for an in-person event, the flow here really is much the same. It's really no different. I would also do for in-person events typically, only because it was out of habit more than anything, and I just found it easier, was to do invitation canvas number 1 and then do either confirmation or reminders, etc. for canvas number 2. So it really just comes down to personal preference at the end of the day. There are some benefits from a reporting point of view, because you can actually just split those canvases out completely and focus on your reporting of those campaigns that are pushing people to the registration page versus because really the reminders, it's not really that exciting, right? It's just they're separate. The heavy lifting is what's happening there at the front with pushing people to the registration page. So let me take you to, so this is, I don't know if about you, but I love these favorites. And there's a little bit of work going on at Oracle at the moment. And I've asked, can we have more favorites? Because you're limited to 10. And I would love to have a few more favorites. Even 20 would be great. 15 would be awesome. 20 would be great. So we'll see what happens there. Okay. So let me just drop down the bottom of the page. Here we go. Okay. So this is now the confirmation and reminders for this month. So this again is the actual campaign you went through. So this is where we use Zoom to register for people. So we use the form to send the confirmation email, and you'll see that this element is from a form. So it's from the form that they come onto this particular campaign, etc. And this is actually out of habit more than anything else. It's actually not necessary because the only people that get onto this page are those that have RSVP'd yes. So that's kind of a moot question, but it's in my template. So I just filled in the blanks and kept going, right? So first reminder goes out. Then here again, because it's just in the template, we now look as it on or before 80 minutes before the webinar start time. So what I'm trying to do here is for people who might register the day before, they've already got a confirmation email for a webinar that happens the next day. So I don't necessarily want to bombard them. So we do concentrate on these things. Then RSVP, yes. Did they ask for an SMS? So we use the form. You'll notice when you register, you say yes or no. If you say yes, we drop you into a specific shared list. And so that shared list is the source of truth for the folks who are then sent an SMS reminder. I just do a final check to make sure the mobile number is accurate. If it doesn't exist, if somehow there's something been messed up, again, this is all in my template. So I don't actually even think about this each month, it just happens. Then it comes through. In our world, what we do is we let Eloqua know from an external activity point of view that an SMS was sent, something we can later segment on. The email goes out and you're all sitting here. So there's 111 of you sitting here right now. Then down the bottom, again, it's built into the template, so that's why it's there. Then down here, now again, using the Zoom integration. Now this is much the same, by the way. So whether using GoToWebinar, Zoom, WebEx, etc., they all have this same sort of functionality, which is the ability to reference the fact that you attended. So of that 111 people, how many actually attended? And so off you go in either direction. And so what I do here is we create an external activity to show either attended or no show. And so I've just noticed a question there from Kath. I'll come back to you in just a second, Kath. I also add people to shared list. And the reason I do this, and maybe there's another topic for a user group at another time. What I had focused on was whenever people register for the user group, you go into what I call all-time user group registrants. So we have a shared list that is just an ever-growing shared list that shows us everybody who has ever registered for a user group. What I wanted to try and do, though, was get to a point where I could see individual activity. So there's a great report in Insight called Shared List Contact Overlap. The only way I could get that report to help me, though, was I had to have the shared lists. And so what I wasn't doing, I wasn't creating shared lists of attended and no-shows. So the only way I could take advantage of the report was to create that. And I was like, oh, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm like, you're an idiot, Derek. Just automate it, build it into the template and have the Canvas take care of it every month. And so now I can go to that report and I've manually gone back, I think 2 years to retro and to get some meaningful data. But fantastic report, really helpful and a great reason to be using shared lists more often if you want to get down to that person granular level, which many of us do. And then they exit. That's it. Game over for those two canvases, Canvas 1 and Canvas 2. All right, question from Kath, and looking at the time, do you ever use SMS instead of a reminder email as opposed to as well as? Maybe now you could link. Yeah, Kath, if we go back to in-person events, yes, with in-person events, if people ask for an SMS reminder, we only send them the SMS reminder. And you've always been able to drop a URL. You could always drop a short link, etc. What you can do now is the embedding. So instead of having, take a look on Google Maps and then it's HTTPS. That's what I used to always do, HTTP blah, blah, blah. Now you can say, click here for Google Maps and you can actually put the URL behind Google Maps. It looks nicer and takes up less space in your SMS, right? Okay, but when it comes to webinars, my only reason so people that ask for an SMS, we send them an SMS and simultaneously we send them the final reminder. So I think what you're saying is valid. It's just that with webinars, you need to have a code and a password. And I don't know, I just wonder if on a mobile, is that fiddly? Most of it, and in our world at least, most of our clients, like yourself, Kath, are sitting at either a desktop or a laptop, for instance. If you had a more B2C audience, maybe personal preference at the end of the day, I think. But I think what you've suggested, Kath, is, yeah, absolutely, you could do that. Does the form element that lets people into the campaign work as the segment? Oh, yeah, great question. Yeah, if you're not familiar with this, you'll notice it's absolutely the same color, right? And actually the same shape. Let me just get multiple screens here for you so we can show those. I didn't do that very well, did I? So yes, if you look at that, it's the same segment. Well, it plays the role of a segment, yes. So every single campaign must start with a segment, or it must start from a form or from another campaign. So there are a few ways people can get onto the canvas. I'll show you the form here in a second, and you'll see how that appears on that. Okay, then can people choose to unsubscribe from SMS separately from email, or else they will unsubscribe from all? Yeah, look, great question. So the Marketing Cube SMS app does have built-in functionality to manage the SMS opt-out process, and that depends on how you're using SMS to a degree. I would always encourage you to talk to your own internal legal counsel to get advice on this. So at Marketing Cube, for instance, we don't use SMS for marketing purposes. The only reason we use SMS is for event reminders, whether it be in person or it's face-to-face. So from that point of view, you may notice we don't always give you the option to opt out, because I figure you didn't really, well, you kind of opted in because you said yes, you want an SMS. So I suppose you could take that as an opt-in, but there's no checkbox that we give you necessarily to say, yes, I'm opting into SMS communications. From our point of view, we don't see it as, yeah, there's no marketing. We don't go out to you and say, hey, do you want to buy a new Eloqua today? We don't do that with SMS. But if you do and do want to use marketing, SMS for marketing, more overt marketing, well, yeah, absolutely. The Marketing Cube app can manage that whole process for you. Andrew, with the activity created after event, these I assume will be visible in Eloqua profile. Bingo, Andrew, yes, because they're an external activity, right? And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do that, because it's so clear when you look at Profiler, it's either no show or attended, easy. So yes, absolutely. Quickly show you, I'm going to cut some slides out, but quickly show you this one. This one is interesting. So this comes down to attribution. If you've got your attribution in place, you can do things like this. Now let me explain what this is so you see the value. This is a representation of the 111 people who registered for today's, or said yes, they RSVP'd yes for today. What you're seeing here, and you'll notice the naming convention, these are email names. So that's the first email that went to all members. And that's the largest source of registrations or RSVP yeses. There was also an email that went to non-members, and you can see that one there. And then a second email. And so you can see, so the second email would have been sent to people who did not open the first one. The third email goes to those who did open the first one, but did not register. Now, in this particular, for this month being, what are we, October, I included, for those people who were attended or no shows in September, we provided a link for them to register for the October, being this month. And so you can see that we got a few pick up or a few new people, or not new, but a few people who registered at that particular point. And then there's a little one over here at 0.9%, which is actually a whole one person. That was from Twitter. So that's all because of the attribution. And that's just available. I go to my form submission data. I can export that information out, and it's right there in front of me. Okay, so when it comes to forms, and I apologize that we've got 6 minutes, two types of forms, and honest to goodness, these are best built as templates. If you try to do this yourself every month, Yeah, you'll just make, I did. That's why I created templates a long time ago. So essentially you will have two forms, and those two forms will behave very differently. One is to RSVP and the other is to register. Now the register is the more simple of the two because there really aren't any conditions, etc., that you're applying. It's pretty simple. However, the RSVP, sorry, I did that in a different way, didn't I? Sorry. RSVP, a single form, but you have two options. Okay, it all depends on the experience. I think there are so many ways you can deliver this experience. So you send out an email, and in that email, you might have RSVP now as a single button, and you can bring them to the landing page. And the first question you ask them is yes or no. Now, the cumbersome side of that one, using the native functionality within Eloqua, is that they still need to put in their first name, last name, blah, blah, blah. But they're saying no. So that kind of feels a bit naff, all right? Now, you could do a little bit of HTML magic, of course, and have when they reach the landing page, it can just be a single question. If they say no, they just hit submit and they're gone off to a confirmation page. However, if they say yes, then the rest of the form can display. That's one option. Second option, go back to the email now. Email arrives and you have two buttons this time. And this is what we did for you this month. So this month you had two buttons in the email, and I'm thinking one said, I can't make the live event, or yes, count me in, I think it was. So if you clicked on no, you went to a confirmation page, and on the way through, we submitted a form on your behalf, which was a RSVP no form. But you didn't see that, obviously. You just went straight to the confirmation page saying, thank you for taking the time to tell us you can't make it. We'll be sure you get the replay. However, if you clicked on yes, I can make it, I'd like to do that, you would have reached, and what is a fairly normal experience for most of you, you would have just reached the page, form would have largely pre-populated. We asked if you want SMS reminder, that sort of stuff, etc. So there are a couple of ways you can deliver RSVP. Registration, easy, pretty clear cut. The only conditions really that you would apply to that one is maybe, do you want an SMS reminder, yes or no? And you can use the conditional steps with that one. From a face-to-face event point of view, you probably want to start adding things like maybe a little COVID disclosure. You know, I haven't tested, I don't know. You need to talk to legal counsel or your HR or whoever's managing that for you, I suppose, as to how you present those questions. That's pretty simple. So what I wanted to do to maximize the use of your time was to take you straight in and actually show you some of those forms. So I'll show you the form that you RSVP yes on, which is this one. You'll see that there are the questions that are visible on the form, but there are also a lot of hidden fields. And this is the other reason why templates are so critical. So all of this stuff would have pre-populated. Where in the world are you is a standard question, but again, it should have pre-populated. If you said Australia, we then ask you which state. This section is progressive profiling. And we only show one of those, so we would have presented one of those, or none if we already know the answers to those questions. Here we ask for the SMS reminder, and there's a little bit of magic code that our team have put together for me, which means that it's only if you say yes do you see this particular field. And so that has to do with what's done here as well as what's done on the landing page. Then do you have a specific question, standard opt-ins, lead source, original, most recent, and then these are all the hidden fields. This is the information that flows through with the URL to help us from an attribution point of view. And so when I look at the submission data and scroll all the way over, it is here. So I can see lead source is Eloqua, lead medium is email, and I think one of these was social. I think it was this one. No, it was wrong. But there's the names of all of those emails that I was telling you about. So that information there is what I've exported directly to Excel and then built out that particular chart. All right, now what's happening back here? So this is where it gets kind of interesting, and it can do your head in if you're if you're not using a template. If you're trying to remember to do this every month, all luck to you. So we have everybody, because the only people that reach this form are those that have said they want to RSVP yes. So we drop everybody into the yes bucket. We place conditions on SMS. So if they asked for an SMS reminder, then we drop them into that one. We do have an all-time user group registrant shared list, which I mentioned to you earlier. And then we also do all RSVPs as well. Because what we want to do there, if we go back to the other window, so if you go all the way back here to the invitations, and because early on when you're sending out the invitations, you really don't care if people have said yes or no in relation to the next step. It's the fact that they have said yes or no. And so it's much easier to have a single step on the campaign canvas than have to ask, did they say yes, yes or no? Did they say no, yes or no? It's unnecessary steps, and you can avoid those by just pushing everybody into a single shared list. So you see here, it's simply have they RSVP'd. Not have they RSVP'd yes or no, but have they RSVP'd. You'll notice that we also used, for the Salesforce customers, the Campaign Association app to update that information as well. And then all the way down here again, have they RSVP'd? So you end up essentially with three RSVP shared lists, a yes, a no, and an all. And this is how we push people onto the canvas. So you'll notice from your options you have available here, you've got add to campaign. And so that's how when anyone submits this form, they then get pushed directly onto the confirmation and reminder canvas, which is canvas number 002. And standard confirmation pages, if people don't opt in, there's a page they get to see, etc. So we have notification emails that go to contact owners. There's obviously the confirmation email that goes to the individual. Anybody that registers for a user group is then also subscribed to the user group at the same time. For those that are already subscribed, no drama, it just repeats the process, so that's fine. That's an individual field we use. Obviously, it's a fairly safe assumption if you're registering for the user group, it's likely you're also an Eloqua customer. So we update that information automatically as well. And then just the standard fields in your contact. All right. Okay, question from Alex. Is it possible to merge contacts together in Eloqua? The answer is no. We sometimes get contacts who register with an email address which is different to what they have in the CRM. What solution is there? So you can control this. It's better controlled from the CRM, Alex, than it is from Eloqua. So the only thing I would suggest to you is you don't sort of slip and fall on a keyboard and type in an email address, right? So someone has made a conscious decision to provide you with a different email address for whatever reason. So you can either honor that, I suppose, and treat those people differently. But if that's too problematic, you probably just want to be aware, though, that they've given you an email address, but then you've chosen to override that and now communicate with them at another email address, which they've given to you earlier. So I think it's probably a good excuse for one of your relationship managers to pick up the phone and call the person and say, hey, look, we don't want to overwhelm you with sort of two of everything. We notice you've provided a second email address. Is there one that you would prefer us to use over the other? Great excuse to contact the customer, right? But definitely so the answer is no in Eloqua. It's much better that you manage that duplication and merge those two things over in Salesforce and then let Eloqua take care of it from there. There were some changes to the app, which I believe the team have been talking to you about, I think, and they've done some testing, and I honestly haven't heard back about the results of that testing, of that merging or that deduplication, essentially. So I will find out and see what we can come up with. All righty. We are at the end of today's webinar, and I did have information to share with you in relation to what's coming with 20D. Just very quickly, archiving of emails and forms will be available. 20D is coming in the middle of November, about the 14th of November. There's a new look and feel for Eloqua. So when it gets to sort of Monday, for some of you, for about the 17th of November, you'll log in, you'll have a completely different experience visually. So get prepared for that. There's a new Zoom app. Look, honestly, I don't understand what's new about this app because the description they've provided does nothing more than what it does right now. So I'm not quite sure. So we'll try and figure that out because there's obviously many of you on the call today who are using Zoom. So we'll dig into that and see what we can find. If you're interested and have been following this idea of the send time optimization and also contact fatigue analysis, those two things will be available in November, but they are part now of the Eloqua Advanced Intelligence add-on package. And so when you see add-on, you hear ka-ching. Okay, so we'll need to have a chat and help you understand what that means. This is essentially a nutshell of what the Advanced Intelligence package or add-on is all about. And it includes those 4 items that you can see in front of you. We will try to spend some more time on that, but obviously not today. Significant changes to apps, some really good ones, more detailed status messages. When you're on the campaign canvas and you see those little error messages in different steps, those messages are getting much better. So they've gone from being a little bit helpful to a lot more helpful, and there's more coming. So that's good news. Big changes and enhancements for the Salesforce.com app. Big one, I think, is the fact that you can... No, where is it? Next slide. Yeah, you can sync updated values of pick lists. So if you make a change, I'm assuming this is what this means. We need to test it to be 100% confident. But if you make a change to a pick list in Salesforce, the corresponding pick list in Eloqua will also change. And I assume vice versa. So we'll do some testing on that and come back to you. Same with this first one, the ability to update subscribe and unsubscribe status on Salesforce.com leads or contacts. We'll explore that one a bit better for those of you who are using Salesforce and come back to you on that one. And final reminder, Chrome and Firefox are the best ways to experience Eloqua. These are the 2 versions that are currently approved and rated as a best choice. Okay. Well, guys, that's it. Happy to hang around if you do have any more questions. Yep. How many releases per year for Eloqua? So it's 4 every quarter. You'll receive those. Thank you, Malcolm. We certainly will make a phone call. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Malcolm. Good call. So the big change on the Zoom app, and Malcolm has exclusive access. So well done, Malcolm. You can have different user accounts. That has been a negative to the current integration. So if I'm Derek, I create Zooms. When I look in Eloqua and I access, I'm only going to see my webinars that I've prepared with my user profile. So that's cool. Yeah, they didn't make any mention of that in the update. So thank you, Malcolm, for sharing that information. All right, guys, thank you again so much for making some time to be with us. We appreciate you. Loads of questions this month, which makes my day, I promise. Thank you so much. And we will see you all online next month in November for our last COVID 2020 webinar for the year. And we'll be back on deck at the end of January for those who have got some time and want to hang out. So I'll see you next month. Have a great week and congratulations, Melbourne. Enjoy tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.